All right. Welcome, everybody, to our AI in Action at WCU webinar series. My name is Dr. Tom Pantasis, and I am an instructional designer with the Teaching and Learning Center. I want to thank you for being here today with us, either in person in the live session or watching this recording after the event. We really appreciate that you're taking some of your precious time to learn more about AI in different educational contexts. I also want to take this instant to thank today's presenter, Dr. Amy Anderson, for sharing some of her wisdom and experience with us today. Before we get started, I do have a couple of housekeeping items to go over with everybody. And as always, doesn't want to advance. Um, the upcoming schedule of topics, this is a larger series. So here's what we have coming up in future weeks. If you're interested in attending any of these sessions, you do need to register for each one individually. And in a few minutes, I'll put a link to the registration page in the chat. Times and dates do vary depending on the week. You can also, if you're watching the recording, pause for a second, scan this QR code, and it'll take you to the registration page. In addition to this webinar series, the TLC also has AI resources available on our website. These resources include sample syllabus statements, tips to consider when talking to students about AI strategies, and links to relevant AI blog posts that we've put together. And you see some of those on the screen. The blog holds a pretty big collection of all sorts of different types of resources, including past webinar recordings, posts from your fellow Westchester faculty about how they are addressing or using AI, podcast episodes, and a whole lot more. We are adding materials to this pretty consistently, so encourage you to check it out on a fairly regular basis. Again, if you're watching the recording and you want to pause and scan those QR codes, you can do that, and I'll put a link to the chat. Last thing to call everyone's attention to before we turn it over is our AI framework. The university put this out at the beginning of the spring semester. It has 6 key recommendations, and I encourage folks to check that out as well. This was our agenda for today. I'm almost done with the introduction and welcome, and we'll turn it over to why we're all here. And that's Amy. If you do have any questions while the presentation is going on, please put them in the chat. I'll keep an eye on that as we go, and then we'll save the last 10 minutes or so to talk about those questions and have some discussion. So at this point, I will turn it over to Dr. Amy Anderson. I will let her start her screen share and give us the presentation on how she's been doing things with AI in the writing space.
All right. Hello everyone. So yeah, like Tom said, so I'm Amy Anderson. I'm in the English department. And I want to talk a little.
Amy, we can see the shared
Ah,
screen. Yeah, let's, we were just talking about
nope,
that.
nope.
No, you
Yep.
wanted,
Yeah,
yep,
hang on. There we
yep.
go.
All right, cool.
Now we've got it. Thank you, Tom.
Yep.
Um, Okay, so yeah, like I said, my name's Amy Anderson. I'm in the English department. Clearly need some work on PowerPoint on Zoom. I want to talk a little bit about how I have been rethinking writing with AI, particularly in the space of WRT 120. So WRT 120 is it's the second course in the first year writing sequence. And it's focused on, the title of the course is Effective Research Writing. The course is focused on several things. So information literacy is a big component. The research process is a big component. So helping students learn how to find sources, and then composing texts that analyze and synthesize those sources. Normally, there's some sort of a research project component that involves students coming up with a research question, finding sources, and figuring out how to answer the question by engaging with their sources. Um, so this is trying to get it to, no, back. Okay, there we go. Okay. This is, it's a useful class. I haven't taught it or I hadn't taught it in maybe 6 years, and I was assigned to reteach it or to teach it again this semester. And when I sat down and I looked at everything that I had from the past, I realized that students could AI most of my assignments. So they could put their research questions into AI, come up with an answer. And that's not going to work. So I started to think like, okay, how can I go in and redesign this class, in particular, the research project? So I'm going to talk a little bit about that. And I want to get to that, I want to, I guess, kind of back my way into it by thinking about two concepts that we talk a lot about, in the first year writing sequence. So the two concepts are the rhetorical situation and genre. Um, so the rhetorical situation is what we use to get students thinking about all the different components that they put together when they're coming up with a text. So, given a particular situation where they need to communicate something, what are the different factors that are going to influence that text? So the triangle, the central triangle, these are kind of the, I guess, the core factors. So you've got, you've got the writer themselves at the top. So, like, who are they? What is their identity? You've got their audience. Who are they trying to communicate to? You've got their purpose. So what's the thing they're trying to communicate? And all of that occurs within a broader context. So that context can be things like, like I guess like the social context, if it's like the environment, is it a school environment, a work environment, like yeah, what are the relationships that they have that are guiding their connection to the audience? And it's even things like, well, what sorts of technology are available for them. So all those things come together to shape that text that they create. And they shape what we think of as the genre of the text. So what are the different characteristics that show up, that make this text what it is? So I guess in current writing studies, in rhetoric and composition scholarship, Carolyn Miller's idea of genre is the one that comes up most frequently, most recently. Miller thinks of genre as social action. So she emphasizes, like, what does the text accomplish in the world? So like, what sorts of things doesn't go out and do, and how do we create texts that accomplish that same sort of social action over and over and over? And when you're faced with that same rhetorical situation, trying to do the same things, that's kind of the well that's where the characteristics of a genre develop. So the emphasis has really been on, what the text does in the world. Um, and when I was faced with AI and the way AI is influencing student writing, it got me thinking that this definition of genre isn't really sufficient anymore. Because the questions I was asking myself, or the main question, was like, what does the text do to and for the writer? So if we're only focused on what the text does in the world, then it doesn't really matter who's composing it or how it's composed. But if part of genre is what the text does to and for the writer, then suddenly it matters. It matters whether a research paper is generated by the student or generated, by ChatGPT. So that was kind of the question that I, took with me as I came back and started kind of trying to rethink this research paper. So again, kind of like the main elements of this research paper are, having students, having them develop a research question, finding sources, answering their question by engaging with the sources. So yeah, and again, if students can just run their question through AI, or they can do it, so what should writing a research paper do to and for the students? And as I was asking that question, there were kind of some things, some ways that I went in and redid the assignment. So some principles that I used. Um, One of them, goodness, I'm in trouble changing slides. Well, and I guess, yeah, before I get into those, some background on this particular project I'm going to talk about. Earlier in the semester, I've had students choose their research question. They've written a personal narrative about what they already know and how that question affects their life. They have found, they have read, they have annotated 7 sources that address their topic. They've also developed a concept map that diagrams the connections between the ideas in the sources. So this is what they're coming into the assignment with. So the things that I kind of highlighted and foregrounded. Oh my goodness. There we go. Um, since students are going to be using AI anyway, I wanted to ask them to critically use it and to critique its output. The model that I use for this is it's an article. It's an article by Amy Morrison called Meta Writing AI and Writing. And what's behind this article was Morrison was given a prompt. It was a bit like, just a very loose prompt to write an article that had to do with AI and writing. So what she does is she goes in and puts that prompt into ChatGPT, generates the response, and then writes her article around the response. So talking about what the AI got right and the things that it missed and got wrong. So that was kind of I guess the model that I used. And I did have students read Morrison's article early on. Um, so this is the project description that I have. And this isn't the whole thing. This is the kind of the main parts of it. So using Amy Morrison's meta writing, AI and writing as a model, this 2,300 to 2,500 word essay will answer your research question by drawing from the genres of personal narrative, AI generated text, and research writing. We'll start by asking your research question to ChatGPT or DeepSeek, giving the LLM a response range of 400 to 500 words. Then you'll draw on your own personal experience with the topic and your research this semester to reflect on AI's response to your question. Um, yeah, like Morrison's essay, the LLM's response should be embedded in your essay and clearly marked. In your essay, you're going to answer these questions. What is your answer to your research question? Why do you answer it this way? So I'm going to ask students to pull in their personal experience and their research. What did the LLM get right in its answer to the question? And why are those parts of the answer right? What did the LLM miss or omit? Why are these mistakes or omissions significant to its answer to your research question? So since they're probably going to put their research questions into AI anyway, I thought we would just address it head on and have them write back to what the LLM generates. So the next thing that I want them to do is I wanted to do is I want to clarify what this, oh, shoot. I want to clarify what I want the students um, to accomplish and connect that to where they can and can't use AI. Um, and the way I did that was I created a very specific part of the assignment description that told the students what I want them to do. Like these are the goals of the assignment. I want them to respond critically and thoughtfully to AI generated text. I want them to compose a nuanced, personal research response to their research question. I want them to integrate and critically respond to sources. I want them to cite them in MLA format, compose an organized essay. So some things like that. And then I say, like, the assignment's goals address skills I want you to personally sharpen. So these are the ways you can use AI. I have that they can use it, to generate the response to the research question. They can dialogue with it about the organization of the essay, and they can use it for proofreading. But then I also have a note at the bottom that says, lets them know that they're not required to use AI. They can if they want, but they're not required to. If they do use it, I want them to acknowledge it, which is the next point I'll get to, and then also to be aware that their work becomes part of the data that goes on to train the LLM. Um, so yeah, the last thing is I want students to be conscious of their AI use by acknowledging it. And that's so in the rubric that I use, I have this point where they need to have a statement talking about how the AI was used. So I want them to be very careful and keep track of what's their work and what the AI is contributing. So this is the first time I'm teaching this. It seems to be going all right so far. I think students are Students are liking the idea that they get to write back to the AI, that the AI's word is not final, but they get to go in and bring their personal experience and the research work that they've done to bear on what the AI has already, has generated. Um, so yeah, I think all this is to say the questions, the things that I think we should be asking ourselves as we're rethinking writing in light of AI is, first of all, like, what do we want our students to learn from their assignments? What skills do they need to learn on their own, and which ones can AI help with? Because AI can't do everything for them. Um, yeah. Again, where can we help students critically engage with AI? So not to just take what it generates as a final word, but to know that, sometimes it gets things wrong, at least in our current iterations, so that they need to be critical with thinking about what the in or the output that it generates. Um, and then the other thing I've been thinking about too is how can we help students gain the skills they need to effectively use AI in their careers beyond college? I think there are some skills, like being able to critically analyze a text, being able to, to think about logical organization. Um, those are skills that they need to learn separately, and then they can go in and use an AI more productively. So yeah, that's the thoughts that I would like to leave everyone with. And I hope this was helpful.
Cool. Thanks, Amy. So Nicole has a couple questions that she's put in the chat. So I don't know if you want to pull those up and take a look. I think the first one is a little bit more of just understanding the Writing 200 courses more broadly in the context of the university. So she asked if the structure of the course and research project is consistent across all the Writing 200 sections or not. So I don't know the answer to that. That'll be an Amy for sure.
So I should say, like, I'm not the director of the first year writing program. So I mean, everybody, how do we say this? The course is designed around research writing. So everyone has to do research in the course. Like, that is some component. What that research project looks like, it, can differ between the courses. So like exactly how it's taught can differ. There's not like one standard research project. But everyone has to have the students doing research and coming up with some sort of a writing project that integrates it.
And my perception working across faculty from the English department is that folks tend to move to their areas of expertise around the projects a lot of times. So for example, like Dr. Laquana Cook does a lot around video games and gaming and like her projects are very, at least as I've seen, orient around those things. Whereas like Dr. Merkich tends to do a little bit more in the ed tech space and how those things are influencing students and stuff like that. So
Mhm.
that's my perception.
Yeah, no, no, like I mean, yeah, there are definitely some faculty that, have more themed courses. Um, I think like the courses I'm teaching this semester, they have an AI theme on them because we spent the first part of the semester, like reading about just, different different articles about what LLMs do well, and then the things that they, don't quite do as well, so that would set the students up, for using them, like for thinking about how to integrate text from it. But for their research project, I'm letting them research whatever they're interested in.
So I love this question, Nicole. Um, she asked, you may get to this, but did you have any students say AI was 100% correct? And how did you address that? And if you didn't have it, and how would you address that in the future if that did come up? Because I think that's a really important piece.
No, that's a great question. Okay, so we haven't gotten to, I guess I haven't seen the drafts yet, when the students are doing that. That said, we have asked AI several things during the semester. So like, I think at the beginning of the semester, I put my syllabus into AI and asked the AI to tell us what were the most important things, and then gave that to the students along with the syllabus. and had the students take a look at it and figure out, like, which things did the AI get right, which things did it miss. So, and yeah, but we've done that with a few different articles. And so I think they've seen from all of that, like, oh, wait a minute, if I were doing the summary, I would pull on this, I would highlight this. So far, I think they've all seen that, like, while it can be fairly reliable, there are definitely things it misses. Um, so I don't know. I'm expecting that to continue. I'm expecting it, but we'll see. We'll see.
So what I heard there too is that you've really structured examples and practice with students so that they have a sense of that before they get to that bigger part of your project.
Hmm.
So, okay. Well,
Yeah.
that's it's a nice way to kind of like work students into understanding that. Um, Punya Mishra has an article on his blog that was talking about like four quadrants in terms of AI expertise and domain expertise, and how like if you have high AI expertise and high domain expertise, you can really like do some really incredible things because you have that ability to pick up on the mistakes
Yeah.
and account for it. But the inverse of that is low in both areas, which is some of our students, and there's a real risk there for the mistakes. And I think he makes a good case for like part of our role is to help students build expertise in both of those domains so they
Yeah.
can go out and like crush it in terms of being able to use AI. One other little interesting piece that came off of that is that in that upper quadrant, we're still doing a lot of cognitive, like heavy cognitive thinking. Like it's mentally taxing to still do that work, um, which I thought was fascinating. I'll try and grab the link for that and get that in here before we're done.
Yeah, no, that would be great. I'd love to take a look at that.
Yeah.
No, I mean, I think like students, the problem comes when like they just put things into AI and then take it, like they take the AI's response. I say it like they take it uncritically. So like I had a student on one of her past projects, who said that she used the AI for organization, but her paper repeated the same things, the same points over and over and over and over and over. And it was like, so there's nothing wrong with asking an AI to help you with organization, but like you need those critical thinking skills and you need to have developed those skills, to think about, well, like what organization makes sense, to take what AI gives you and then pick and choose, and make it work for you. And I think, the trick, or maybe not the trick, that the challenge in a lot of these first year writing classes is helping students, or getting students to separate those out and try, to develop the skills they need, those critical thinking skills, so that they can then go and use them they can then go apply them to AI. But you can't always develop those skills while you're using the AI.
Yeah, I'm just trying to think of because, a lot of, journal editors and publication boards have now statements that limiting the use of generative AI in articles. And so, like, what does that look like for sort of training our students and like using the tools, but in a way that they might be expected to, if that makes sense?
I mean, I guess maybe some of the way I'm thinking about it is like, in these freshman, sophomore level classes, I think getting them to be conscious, like getting them to be really conscious of exactly where they're using AI, but getting them to develop or helping them develop the skills separate from AI. So I feel like, yeah, I mean, and this isn't an exact analogy, but the same way that like elementary school kids are still learning, like, yeah, elementary school kids they're still learning their multiplication tables, even
Mhm.
though, even though they've got a calculator
Yeah.
later. So you need to understand like these fundamentals and these basics so that you can go on and use the tool to your advantage later on. So I think, like with a lot of my classes, again, and I'm trying to explain to them exactly why I don't want them to use AI on some things. But, I think, yeah, like when I'm teaching more upper level classes, then I think that there are more things that I'm okay with them using AI for, because that's preparing them for how they're going to be, how they're going to, I guess, how they're going to be in the the job, like in their jobs beyond college. It doesn't make sense to totally restrict them from using it.
Yeah, so I teach a 300 level writing emphasis class in our discipline, and I'm trying to figure out how to do sort of a similar thing of how to guide students in using AI in a way that can help them, structure, organize, improve their literature review that I have them do in the class, but without, having them just turn over that cognitive work and that cognitive load to AI. So trying to figure out what that balance is.
It's hard. I don't know. I will say, something else I'm trying in the class this semester, and this is for them thinking about how sources work. So yeah, I think like, how do we say this? Normally in this class, students do like a very traditional, like a very traditional annotated bibliography.
Yep.
Dr. Megan Schottler in our department has an assignment where she has them do a concept map where they put their research question in the middle and then they diagram out all the relationships between the sources, like the different ideas, and they show how they all connect. And I think that's really helpful because it takes students, like, how do I say this? Like students, they have to understand the content of the article. They have to understand that first, but that takes them to the next level and and I think it does work that an AI can't do.
Yeah, I used to assign, sorry, Tom. I used to assign an annotated bibliography and then figured out that students could just ask generative AI to do that. So now I have them do a synthesis matrix, which is basically like an Excel file where I ask them to pull out specific things in each article with the hope that they can then form those connections. But I like the idea of a concept map to sort of support what they struggle with the most, which is sort of synthesizing information from multiple sources.
Not, I mean, this is related, but there's a reference I put in there from someone. Mahabali has a lesson plan around connecting cake making and AI use as an analogy. And it's really interesting in that it looks at the different ways we talk about making cakes, which is very accessible for most people, and how that lines up with AI. So, for example, like we can bake a cake from scratch, right? That's a valuable skill, but not everyone needs to know how to do that because there's things like cake mixes and you can go to the bakery and buy something. And I really like the way that it helps people think about when AI makes sense or not and some of the questions that it poses. It would be definitely more of an introductory piece leading into some of what y'all have been talking about here. Um, but I found that to be a particularly useful set. And she has a lesson plan. It's available with questions and things like that. You can kind of take and modify and use as you want to. So put that in the chat for you too.
And unfortunately, I do have to run to another appointment, but thank you very much.
Yes, thanks for coming, Nicole.
Yep.
Great, thanks.
I will stop the recording.